My name is Jacob Stein, and I am 64 years old. For decades, I walked a path of devotion as a rabbi, dedicating my life to the study and teaching of the Torah. My world was structured, deeply rooted in tradition, shaped by discipline, and guided by an unwavering commitment to my faith and my community. I thought I understood the truth. I thought my convictions were unshakable. But one night changed everything. What I encountered in those moments of death reshaped my understanding of God, the Messiah, and my very purpose on this earth. I do not share this story to argue or persuade, but simply to testify to the truth I have come to know. It was an ordinary Friday evening. The Sabbath had begun, and my family and I had just finished our traditional Shabbat dinner. The soft glow of the candles flickered across the table, casting warm light over the room. A familiar peace filled the air, the kind that always accompanied our Friday nights. My wife Miriam and I moved to the living room, settling into the quiet comfort of our home. That's when I decided to fix a faulty toaster that had been giving us trouble. A simple task, or so I thought. As I adjusted the wires, a sudden surge of electricity coursed through me. Everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was no longer in my living room. I found myself in a place unlike anything I had ever experienced, a realm of absolute darkness. But this was no ordinary absence of light. It was a living, suffocating void, heavy, oppressive. It pressed against me, filling every space with an unbearable weight. The silence was deafening, yet somehow I was not alone. Though I could see nothing, I could feel them. Countless souls trapped in this abyss. Their presence was undeniable, their anguish palpable. It was as if they were bound, shackled by something unseen. I could sense their regret, their sorrow, their torment. And as I stood there, an overwhelming fear gripped me. Was this my fate? Was I to remain here, lost in the void? Just as despair began to consume me, a light appeared in the distance. The light was unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just bright. It was alive, warm, radiant, pulsating with a presence that defied comprehension. It cut through the darkness effortlessly, pushing it back as if it had no power before it. The suffocating weight that had pressed upon me began to lift. The light grew closer, and from within it, a figure emerged, majestic, powerful, yet overflowing with peace and love. His very presence filled me with awe. I fell to my knees, overcome by something greater than fear, reverence. Though I had never seen him before, I knew instantly who he was. This was no ordinary man. This was the Messiah. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he extended his hand toward me, and the moment he did, the crushing weight of despair vanished. In its place, an overwhelming sense of peace flooded my being. It was unlike anything I had ever known. Not just the absence of fear, but the presence of something deeper. A love so profound, so complete, that it reached into the very depths of my soul. My mind raced with questions, but in his presence they seemed to quiet, as if the answers were already known, waiting to be revealed in time. Everything around me began to shift. The darkness melted away entirely, replaced by a realm of indescribable beauty. Beneath me, the ground shimmered like glass, reflecting the radiant light emanating from him. Trees stretched toward the sky, their leaves glowing with colors beyond earthly comprehension. A river flowed nearby, its waters so pure and alive that they seemed to sing, a melody that resonated deep within me, stirring something ancient and sacred. The air itself carried a presence, as if every particle was infused with holiness. I felt small, yet completely known, unworthy, yet deeply loved. Every barrier between my heart and the truth I had spent my life seeking seemed to dissolve in an instant. Then, like a flood, scriptures I had studied for decades rushed through my mind. Passages from Isaiah, Micah, and the Psalms, verses I had recited countless times, now illuminated with a meaning I had never fully grasped. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. I had read these words. I had taught them, yet I had never truly seen them. Piece by piece, the scriptures I had spent my life studying began to align, forming a picture so clear, so undeniable, that I could no longer resist its meaning. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from of old, from ancient times. Micah's prophecy stood before me, alive in the very presence of the one who fulfilled it. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? And then, he raised his hands. That's when I saw them, the marks, the scars, wounds that spoke louder than any words could. They were not just remnants of suffering. They were the fulfillment of prophecy. I had debated these passages. I had dismissed them. I had argued that they could not possibly refer to the Messiah. But now, I was standing before the one they were written about. And in that moment, I understood. Then, he spoke. His voice was unlike any I had ever heard. Not just sound, but power. Not just words, but truth. Jacob, my son. The way he said my name. It was filled with a love so deep, so personal, that it reached into the very core of my being. Each word carried weight, resonating not just in my ears, but in my soul. You have sought me all your life, he continued, reading the scriptures, teaching others, searching for truth, but you looked for me where I was not, and rejected me where I was. Memories rushed through my mind, sermons where I had passionately denied him, students I had taught to look elsewhere for the Messiah, debates where I had confidently dismissed his fulfillment of prophecy. Yet in his voice, there was no condemnation, only love, a love that saw my past, yet welcomed me still. My lips trembled as I tried to speak. A lifetime of certainty had been shattered in a single moment. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had built my faith upon, had led me to reject the very one standing before me. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Are you?" He looked at me with eyes that held eternity itself. Then, with infinite authority and tenderness, he spoke, "I am." The words reverberated through my being, not just heard, but felt, not just spoken, but declared. And in those two words, I understood. This was the voice that had spoken creation into existence, the voice that had thundered from Mount Sinai, the voice that had called to the prophets through the ages. And now, it was calling to me. I am the one your people have waited for, the one your prophets spoke of, the one you have longed to see. The space around us shifted. Time itself seemed to bend, as if past, present, and future had converged in this single moment of revelation. I could no longer deny the truth. I had spent my life searching for the Messiah, and now I was standing before him. Desperation gripped me. I had spent decades studying, teaching, defending the scriptures, yet I had missed the very one they pointed to. I lifted my eyes to him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Show me," I pleaded. "Help me understand what I failed to see." He smiled. It was a smile filled with patience, with knowing, as if he had been waiting for this moment all my life. "Let us reason together," he said, echoing the words of Isaiah. And suddenly, the space around us was filled with light. Not just light, but words. Living scripture. Glowing, radiant texts written in Hebrew and Aramaic, suspended in the air, pulsing with divine brilliance. I recognized them instantly. Passages I had spent a lifetime studying, verses I had debated, dissected, analyzed. Now they shone with new meaning. Truth illuminated before my eyes. I turned, awestruck, as the sacred texts shifted before me, not as ink on parchment, but as living words, pulsing with divine energy. He gestured toward them. "Begin with Moses," he said. "What did he write about me?" My gaze fell upon Genesis 3:15, glowing with undeniable clarity. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." The first prophecy, the promise of redemption, hidden in plain sight since the beginning. Then another passage shone brightly, Genesis 22, the binding of Isaac. I had always seen it as a test of Abraham's faith, but now I saw the deeper meaning. A father offering his only son, a son carrying the wood for his own sacrifice. How had I not seen it before? Deuteronomy 18:15 appeared next. "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own brothers. You must listen to him." Moses had spoken of one to come, one who would be greater than himself, and I, a teacher of the Torah, had missed the one it was all pointing to. My thoughts raced as more passages ignited with divine brilliance, the words I had known my entire life, now alive with a clarity I had never experienced. Daniel 9:26 shimmered before me. After 62 sevens, the Anointed One will be cut off and will have nothing. The prophecy had always troubled scholars, for it placed the coming of the Messiah and his suffering in the 1st century. I swallowed hard. The timeline was undeniable. Then, Isaiah 53 unfolded like a scroll before me. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. A lump formed in my throat. For years we had argued that this passage referred to Israel, not an individual. But as the words shone before me, I could no longer escape the truth. It was him. It had always been him. I exhaled sharply, the weight of revelation pressing down on me. He looked at me, his voice gentle yet firm. Your people still wait for what has already come. I trembled because I knew he was right. A silence fell between us, not empty, but full of understanding, full of realization, full of a truth too vast to ignore. He continued, his words filled with both sorrow and love. They search the scriptures daily, yet fail to see that they testify of me. I lowered my head, memories of my past teachings flashing through my mind. The lectures, the debates, the unwavering confidence in my own interpretations. I had spent my life defending our understanding of the Messiah. I had dismissed, refuted, rejected. But now I saw what had been there all along. I lifted my eyes to him, the one whom I had spent my life searching for, without realizing he had already come. You have been brought here, he said, not just for your own sake, but for theirs. His words struck me with the force of divine purpose. This was not just a revelation, it was a commission. I was being sent back, with a message, with a mission. I felt the weight of his words settle deep within me. A mission, a calling, a responsibility I could not ignore. My entire life had been preparation for this moment. Every hour spent studying the Torah, every sermon I had preached, every debate I had fought, had led me here, to this truth, to this Messiah. He looked at me with infinite compassion. Tell them what you have seen. His voice carried authority, yet it was not a command. It was an invitation. Share the truth that has been revealed to you. Some will reject it, just as they rejected me, but others, they will hear, and they will believe. His presence filled me with strength, with certainty, with a peace beyond understanding. And then, I heard him speak one last time. You are not alone. My spirit will go with you, and I will give you the words to speak. The next instant, I was gasping for air. I jolted awake, my body convulsing as air filled my lungs. Blinding light, voices shouting, hands pressing against my chest. I was back. Miriam was kneeling beside me, tears streaming down her face, her hands clutching mine as paramedics worked frantically around me. Confusion filled their eyes. Later I would learn why. I had been clinically dead for 14 minutes and 16 seconds. Yet here I was, awake, alert, whole. The doctors called it a miracle. They had no explanation for why my brain had not suffered damage, for why my heart had restarted when it shouldn't have. They were right about one thing. It was a miracle. But they didn't understand the full extent of what had happened. Because that night, I had died, and I had been reborn. The Jacob Stein who had confidently dismissed Jesus as the Messiah was gone. In his place stood a man forever changed, a man who had seen the truth and could no longer remain silent. The weeks that followed were both a test and a revelation. As expected, my newfound belief was not welcomed. My position as a rabbi was immediately questioned. Whispers spread through the community. Colleagues I had known for decades turned away from me. Some of my closest friends, men with whom I had studied the Torah, men I had trusted, refused to speak to me. My children struggled to understand. How could their father, a man so deeply rooted in tradition, suddenly embrace what we had always rejected? Only Miriam seemed to sense that something profound had taken place. She did not understand it fully, not yet, but she saw the change in me, and in her eyes, I saw both fear and hope. But even as I faced rejection, even as I stood on the precipice of losing everything I had built my life upon, I felt no fear, because I knew the truth. And once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. The scriptures I had spent my life studying now burned with new meaning. Passages that once seemed mysterious or symbolic now stood before me in perfect clarity. The festivals, the prayers, the traditions, every one of them pointed to him. Every prophecy found its fulfillment in him. I had spent my life searching for the Messiah, and now I understood. I had always belonged to him. What I once feared would make me less Jewish had, in fact, completed my faith, but knowing the truth was not enough. I had been given a mission, and I could not keep silent. So I spoke. I shared my testimony, first with my family, then with my congregation, then with anyone who would listen. And just as he had warned, some rejected me, some ridiculed me, some called me a traitor, but others listened. Others searched the scriptures for themselves. Others saw what I had seen and believed. Now, as I share this testimony, I do so with full awareness of the cost. I know that many will dismiss it. They will say I was delirious, that my mind conjured illusions in the throes of death. Others will see me as a betrayer, a man who abandoned his faith for something foreign, something unwelcome. But I cannot deny what I have seen and heard. I cannot silence the truth that has transformed my life. To my Jewish brothers and sisters, I understand your skepticism. I lived in that same skepticism for over 60 years. I too was convinced that Jesus could not be the Messiah. But I implore you, examine the scriptures again. Read them not just with the mind, but with an open heart. The Messiah we have been waiting for has already come, and he is coming again. The same love that reached out to me in that place between life and death reaches out to you now. The same truth that shattered my certainty and rebuilt my faith is waiting for you to see. The same Messiah who stood before me is calling your name just as he called mine. I do not ask you to take my word for it. I do not ask you to believe because of my experience alone. I ask only this: search, seek, read the scriptures again, not through the lens of tradition, but with a heart willing to see what has always been there. The choice now lies before you, just as it once lay before me. In that moment between darkness and light, choose wisely, for eternity hangs in the balance.